I'm going to turn the camera around. We'll have a quick look at some bees first, and then we'll go for a wander. So what you can see here is a solitary bee nesting box, and you might be able to see a few bees buzzing in and out of it. We'll go a bit closer and see if we can get one to come in. They don't seem that bothered if we're close. So you can see there are these various holes that the bees go into. Here's one. That's probably a red mason bee. Not really going to identify them properly, but I think these are red mason bees. One of the commoner bees that collect mud and make little cells for their eggs in that way. And they form these, I say, these little, fill these little tubes up with bits of mud. They lay an egg in each one, and by doing that, they create somewhere for their young to grow, their larvae to grow, protected a bit from things that might predate them or parasitize them. Rather funky. Quite a lot of mine. I'll just clear the cobweb away. Shouldn't interfere really, but it seems a bit mean to have a cobweb over the entrance where they're all trying to fly in. So there we go. That's a solitary bee box with quite a few bees visiting at the moment. So we'll go for a wander now into the wood. Some goldfinch flying over. And just have a general look and see what we see, what we can hear. The chiff chaff calling. Quite a few of them on the Dawn Chorus broadcast I did a little while ago. Lots and lots of this greater stitchwort being visited by various insects. See if I can find any of them near enough to have a good look at. Rather an attractive flower, the greater stitchwort. Quite large groups of it. Some dandelions there. And we'll just wander into the reserve and into the expanse of bluebells that there are here. Lots and lots of bluebells, of course. Wood is particularly noted for these, and we are at the moment in the middle of having our few public open days when members of the public can book their tickets and come and visit the reserve and see all this in the flesh. So if you look up Perryvale Wood or Selborne Society online, if you're anywhere near northwest London, you can find out how to get tickets and how to come and visit this place. It's not generally open, of course. Quite a bit of bluebell variety. I might point out one or two interesting ones as we go past. There are variations. Now these are the native bluebell, or the English bluebell, or the British bluebell, or whatever you want to call it. And the features that tell you it is the native one is that they tend to have these drooping stems, quite low with the bells hanging off. The bells all pretty much are hanging off one side of the stem. The structure of the bell has these very curly bits, and the pollen is yellowy. So on the Spanish bluebell, or the hybrid of Spanish bluebells, which is between these and the Spanish bluebell, which is spreading, they tend to have a much more robust bell. Blue pollen tend to be more upright as well. So you can tell these are, in the main, at least on external features, very good for being the native species of bluebell rather than the one that's been introduced as a garden plant and started to hybridize into the natives. So that's good to know. But even within the native bluebell, there is a chunk of variation. Here is a fairly obvious colour variation. That this one is white in colour. It is the same species. It's just one of the ones that has a different colour. Doesn't seem to produce the blue coloration, and you get small amounts of these. I mean, I would guess, I don't know, it's hard to judge, but just scanning across here, there's one or two across this whole vista that are that white colour. So you've got to be talking, maybe 1 in 50,000, 1 in 100,000 or something like that is this white form. So it's fairly unusual. But with around 5 million or so flowering plants of this bluebell in this reserve, we do get, a reasonable number of the white ones as well. It's a lovely sunny spring day. Can't always guarantee that. Actually, I sometimes think these plants look even better under slightly dull and damp conditions. Not as pleasant to walk in, of course, but the sun almost washes them out in these conditions. More subtle variation here. This one still has the pink, still has a pinky blue colour, but it's much paler. And again, there is an awful lot of colour variation occurs within the bluebells. Or can. Small numbers. The overwhelming majority are, of course, these typical ones in colour and structure. But you do get some other ones. Right. There's a hairy-footed flower bee just flying here. Yeah, flying away. And down here, there's a queen bombus terrestris bumblebee. Possibly you can hear her buzzing on the stream, I'm not sure. One of the earliest bumblebees to emerge. Well, quite a few of the species are out now, but Bombus terrestris, these queens can be active even December, January if it's a warmish day. There she goes. Go a little bit further into the reserve. Hopefully hear quite a bit more bird song going on. Yeah, you'll be on broadcast briefly, but a couple of paths to choose from here. We're going to go down the left-hand one, just because there's something I want to have a look at there. Quickly check out. You can see some of our dead hedges that we're creating. Part of the management of this reserve does involve taking down some of the scrub growth to let light into the lower areas, and one of the ways we deal with that stuff that we've cut down is we leave these effectively dead hedges, they're called, structures of the built up material. It'll rot down over a few years, but as it's there, it's just providing habitat and variety, variation for things. Bit of a banking, so always useful to know. And then we'll go along here, and assuming I can find it, we were looking at a variation before, some of the different colours of the bluebells. But there are other things that can go a bit weird in their development. So we'll just pop down here to have a look at these ones, and these have been reliably here for years. But you can see here, these ones, the flower structure really fails to develop properly at all. You get this very essentially twisted form. So I'm told by visiting botanists it's called variation bracteata of bluebell, but it's a very extreme variation. I don't think I've ever seen these ones produce any sort of flower that could possibly get pollinated. So the little patch will be spreading from bulbs, the bulbs split and it can spread vegetatively. But clearly this variation, and if there's something genetic behind it, whatever the genetics are that create this unusual form, is not from this clump of plants going to be able to be spreading that genetic material anywhere else. But it's a very interesting little variation. It's reliably here in just this little clump every year. And it's the same plant as the bluebells behind it. It's the same thing, but for some reason it doesn't, the flowers here just don't develop into the proper bells. They develop into this rather twisted, elongated bract form instead. That's always interesting to spot. It's always, every year I like to come back and just check if it's recurred, which it has. And down at this level, of course, is a level at which a lot of organisms would be experiencing this. The foxes wandering through would be seeing it at this level. The insects buzzing over the surface would be seeing it at this level. And we're seeing there's quite a few honeybees in here, which aren't a particularly exciting insect. They're essentially a crop. There are other bees, bumblebees about, there are solitary bees about, as well as the ones we saw at the entrance at the start of the broadcast. Here's a red-tailed bumblebee, so called because it's got very obvious red tails. And you see, you should be able to see when it comes round, it's got its pollen baskets filled, so it's clearly been collecting a lot of pollen and a lot of nectar. Because it's got its pollen baskets, it's foraging in that way, that tells us this is the red-tailed bumblebee and not the somewhat similar, there's a cuckoo bumblebee, a brood parasite that effectively steals the nests of these bees. But they wouldn't have the pollen baskets, so that we can safely say is red-tailed bumblebee. Can't actually remember the scientific name offhand, but I'll make sure I make a note of that when I submit the records. So there we go. That's another bee making use of the rich nectar sources here. Speckled wood butterfly flying. Let's see if I can get near to it. It's on the end of this bit of a log. If I get too close, it will fly. Hopefully you can see that. Speckled wood butterfly. The males of this species have two tactics. One type of male like defends a territory, holds an area, has a perch, like perhaps that one did, sits there and regularly just defends a territory, nice sunny patch, waits for the females to come and visit its territory. But then there's another group of males which effectively don't really guard the territories but hang around, and then when they see a female, particularly if the existing male is distracted, try and rush in and mate with her. And the existing male, the guarding males would then try and chase them off. So it's all interesting dynamics within even our common species. Although, I said this reserve is closed to the public, members of the Selborne Society which run it, members of the charity that manage this place, can borrow keys. So there are people in here other than me today who I may occasionally run into, largely keeping away from broadcasting people without having agreed it with them in advance. But if somebody just wanders through, they wander through. But I will try and avoid as much as I can places where there are other members visiting. But this is, that's a jackdaw just called, that's a jack called. Quite a few insects flying around the flowers, but at the moment this isn't a very practical way. There's a green-veined white butterfly on the leaf, it's just flown. It's not flown far, so it's perched up on the bramble here. Hopefully you can see it. It's flown off. Green-veined white. That one. And another common butterfly. Of the sort of commoner small-sized whites that there are in Britain, that, the small white, the large white, the orange tip. The green-veined white seems to be about the most shade tolerant of them. So it's the most likely, if you see one of those whites in this sort of woodland here in Britain, that it's green-veined rather than one of the others. But not so likely that you can be absolutely sure, so it is worth checking properly. And green-veined white, if you see it well, is fairly distinctive. The pattern of venation on the underside of the wings, the sort of dark looking green, although they're technically yellow and brown veins, make it obviously different to small white and large white and orange tip. The female of orange tip doesn't have the orange tips, so it looks superficially similar, but it's underneath the wing is quite different. So there are some people around here, so we'll avoid them, and we'll go and have a look in the pond field, I think. see around here. Quite a few hoverflies here. I want a bee fly. Bee flies are always nice. So that's a bee fly, rather a cute insect, and I always encourage people to look for another one. Just hover quite nicely. It is a dark bordered bee fly. You make out enough of the wings, which is the common one. There are other types of bee fly. It's Bumblebee, for those who like the scientific name, or Bombilius major is that one. There are other bee flies, so I do try to check a few of them out and see if there are any of the less common ones. Never had one of the less common ones here. Doesn't mean they're not present, of course. A lovely clump of bluebells here, and you can possibly see that some of these bluebells are already starting to have gone over to go a bit brown. There's a butterfly here. It's a Brimstone Butterfly on here. Bright sulphurous yellow butterfly. Extend towards it. There we are, Brimstone Butterfly. That's the male. The female is a much paler lime green. So this is a male brimstone, enjoying the nectar there on that bluebell. Not too bothered about me getting close with the camera, which is unusual. So mainly, as long as you don't put a shadow over the insects, they behave. So rather nice again, just things making use of all of this nectar. Fueling up. Bits of cow parsley. Common enough, again, a common umbelliferous plant. Just starting to come out into flower. And again, it's going to start to be a nectar source for things. Quick zip round the back of the pond here. Water levels should be low enough that we can get round the back without having to wade through. This fairly wide area is kept open by one of our bird ringers, our only bird ringer, Phil, who, with appropriate training and permissions from the authorities, runs a series of mist nets here to catch birds, to hold the details of them, put a little metal ring on their leg, so that when they're recaptured, we can know it's the same bird that we saw the previous time. And it gives lots of useful scientific data, so that's one of the things that we do here. We do try and use this reserve for, ecological research, for want of a better term, and things like the bird ringing studies are a key part of that. So these areas, this track was kept open for that. A lot of noise there from the central line rattling past like a noisy thing. I'd forgotten this had fallen down. A bit of old willow came down earlier in the stormy conditions. Seems to have fallen a bit further now. Might make it rather awkward to get past, so just give me a second. I need to come along and do something about that when I'm not broadcasting. There we go. Anyway, easy enough to get past without too much effort. And as you've got here our reed bed and pond. You see the water down there. Reasonably high water levels at the moment. Quite a mature pond, starting to gradually silt up around the reeds as ponds often do. Keeping an eye out. So here's where the pond, when it's overfull, flows over and eventually drains out. It's damp, a bit muddy, but dry enough now that I can wander through here. Get into another of these ringing rides that are kept open. And pond. Always nice to scan the ponds on these reeds for dragonflies and damselflies, the ordinata. It's fairly early in the season for them at the moment. I have seen a few, 2 or 3 I think so far this year, large red damselfly, and it's a nice sunny day, so not impossible there'd be one here. Let me have a scan. But maybe not. You see the last year's reeds which are all brown, and new ones will be shooting up. Right. Parakeets shouting. Not a European, or certainly not a British bird, the parakeet. I don't think they get into Europe in a native range. They're certainly in Asia and in northern India natively. I don't think they reach as far in their native range as Europe, but they're one of those species that seems to escape and establish itself. I've seen parakeet populations in other European cities as well as here in London. Just keep an eye on where people are, avoid including them. We'll go up Boundary Stream, which is one of the less well trodden of the paths that we have. In the reserve. This is where the stream that feeds that pond we were looking at flows down. And you see the balance of the plants is a bit different here. There are still plenty of bluebells. There are lots of these yellow lesser celandines and lots of the cow parsley, but less dense carpets of the bluebells here. And once you go into the wood itself, that is largely as was. Hello, Sonia Vaz. I was having a walk here around Perivale Wood in northwest London, enjoying the place, seeing what wildlife there is to see. blackcap singing. Stopped as soon as I said there's a blackcap singing, of course, because that's what birds do when they hear them being talked about. They immediately stop. There's a gull of some kind calling overhead. Either a herring gull or a lesser black-backed gull. According to the open, I might be able to see which it is. The calls are pretty similar. I certainly wouldn't reliably say which one is which from a call. Yeah, it's lovely weather. It feels like proper spring at the moment. Carrion crow shouting loudly there. There's quite a large carrion crow roost in this reserve. We do a survey of it once a year in January where a small number of us get together and coordinate what we're doing to try and get the best estimate of the population of the carrion crow we can. And in winter, the roost numbers here are typically somewhere around 1,000, although they've seemed to have been lower the last few years. Stock dove calling. You can hear that hoo, 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 hoo call. See if it does it again. Stock dove, anyway, seems to have stopped. I'll point it out if it goes again. Speckled wood butterflies are going to settle somewhere. Let me have another look at it. No. There's the stock dove again. Laughing call. High-pitched laughing call was the pecker. The yaffle call, as it's known. There, you just feel. That looked interesting. Distinctive. There's nothing else that sounds like that. Yes. Okay, it's just to the north of just above the brown plant. So you want to leave about the centre of the screen now. Speckled wood. It's probably going to be disturbed by that hoverfly in a moment. There we go. Right, we'll cut through the centre of the wood when we get to the end here again. Start to drift back. Having this place with limited public access does make it much more peaceful. We are in the process of doing our open days at the moment. So Tuesday coming up and next Saturday there are opportunities for people to go and visit this place. If we go back into the main body of the wood, we'll get more of these carpets of bluebell. Really rather attractive. And just sort of a month really when they're out like this at most. Maybe not even that. And then they'll have done their spring, they'll have done their photosynthesizing in their leaves, they'll have done their getting pollinated and getting fertilized with their flowers, dry up, produce seed heads and disappear. Chiff chaff calling, that 2-note call. And a blackbird flying, sitting on one of the twigs low down in there. Yeah, you see as we were looking at earlier again, just a bit, another of those slightly odd white forms of the bluebell. Odd colour variation. And then the grass here, this tall, quite hard to see in the tall grass here, is wood millet, a grass that grows in woodland. These very tall seed heads. So, just walking further through the reserve, doing a loop, going back towards where we started. So this is our central clearing, popular place for people to come when they're visiting and sit down, have their picnic or have their tea. And off to the side we've got what we call our education clearing. This is where one of our volunteers or one of our members looks after our school's parties, and we do an educational thing here. So we do try to get schools in, give the kids the experience of this place, but also try and do a bit of proper environmental education. And Nicola, who does this, has got a really nice program of classes and lessons that you can do for the children. It just helps us as a charity to spread the knowledge. We'll not go down that way today, but you can see another nice path leading through the bluebells again. Lots of nice paths leading to the bluebells. But we'll wander down here. Lots more of this wood millet that I was talking about before. This woodland grass with its tall, thin seed heads. Great spotted woodpecker chucking away. You can see it, it's at the top of this dead tree. I doubt very much you'll make it out on the broadcast. Unfortunately, the way this is set up at the moment, I can't zoom in with the phone to get a better image. If it was less obscured by vegetation, I might have been able to hold binoculars up and have a look. But let me see you up there. Yeah, I think it's dropped out. But it was up in that dead tree there, presumably looking for insects as well as maybe looking for somewhere to build a hole and establish its territory for the year. We have 2 woodpecker species breed commonly in here. Great spotted woodpecker and green woodpecker. Lesser spotted woodpecker, which is much rarer and has become much rarer in recent years, doesn't occur here anymore. Oh, there's an orange-tipped butterfly. If this settles, it's quite an attractive butterfly. And in typical wildlife fashion, it flies away as soon as I say I'm going to talk about it. But a white butterfly with orange tips to the wings. If you're in the UK, you'll almost certainly be familiar with it. It's a common butterfly and it's fairly distinctive. But it flew away, as they do. You see there one of the bird boxes we have on the trees. And again, we put these here. They provide a habitat for birds. This one's for either blue tit or great tit. And again, Phil, who I was mentioning before, who's our expert on birds and who has the appropriate licensing and training, can come later in the season, open these up, see what the chicks are, see how developed they are, put these little metal rings on their legs so when they're recaptured later, when they're observed later, we know where the same species are and you get a sense of things about the life cycle, things about movements of birds from that study. So again, we try and do a lot of that. There's a couple of people wandering towards me. We'll see if they come this way. If they do, I'll just turn the camera the other way because I don't like to broadcast people without their permission because it's not really fair. I mean, technically we're not in public, so I'm not sure if it's even lawful to broadcast them without their permission. If they're in a public place, that will be fine. But I'll just be well behaved. I'm just pointing the other way, otherwise you'll be on the internet. So I'm just broadcasting. So I'll point the camera away from you. We'll go and have a quick look at another lower woodland pond because it's a somewhat interesting little feature. Sun's gone in now, which I always think makes the bluebells look nicer. I think the bright sun slightly washes them out, whereas it gets a bit duller. Certainly to my eyes, it almost looks like the blue almost rises off them as a mist. So this is what we call lower woodland pond. It sometimes gets referred to as the bomb crater pond, but it's not a bomb crater, and you can tell it's not a bomb crater because this tree standing here is about 150 years old. So if there'd been a Second World War bomb dropped here, there wouldn't be the tall trees next to it. But it's an interesting little woodland pond that spends a lot of its time actually dried up, but is still technically a pond. And we haven't really got a strong sense of the water cycle. You can have a really wet time and it can be dry. You can have a relatively dry time and it can be wet. So it's probably something to do with the amount of liquid being taken up out of the soil by all of the trees. But they create interesting little shaded ponds with slightly different structures and habitats, and certainly different insects using it and living in there. It's a rather interesting feature. One suggestion is this may be something to do with human occupation of the wood. There was a suggestion it was a saw pit. So if you're processing timber, one person stands in the bottom of the pit, one person stands in the top, and you saw the timber with a big long saw between the top. The best position to be is in the top, because if you're in the bottom, all the saw is falling on you, and the person at the top gets called the top dog, which is where that comes from, and that's the bottom dog in the bottom, or the underdog. But we don't think this is a saw pit, so all that was an irrelevance. We think possibly there was something to do with charcoal burning in here. Maybe it was associated with that. But we don't really know. We have got an archaeologist who's trying to learn more about the human history of this wood for us. I always like to go and have a look at that pond and just see what the water levels are like. Anyway, almost back to where we started now, so I'll wander back towards where we began and then see if I can find a nice vista to end the broadcast on. Getting the 2-note call of Chip Chap there quite loudly. And I think we'll end back here having a look across the bluebells, focusing on this rather nice white one. And we'll end the broadcast here. Nice little wander around Perryville Wood. Say, last bit of advertising. If you're anywhere near Northwest London and want to come and see this place yourself, if you search Perryvale Wood or Selborne Society on the internet, you'll find our website. You'll find out how you can book tickets to come here, or how you can become a member of the organisation that runs it and have more ability to access the reserve when you want. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for joining me, everyone who did, and Sonia Vaz, who's been commenting. And yeah, more broadcasts soon.